Morning.
A couple weeks ago, I was messing around on my computer, procrastinating really, when I fell down an internet rabbit hole. You've all been there. One click led to another as I spiraled through cyberspace. Somehow, the Wikipedia page for the dark web led me to the Twitter account of the hacking group Anonymous, which somehow transported me to the Facebook page of the Dalai Lama. So there I was, scrolling through Facebook posts authored by the spiritual leader of Tibet, when I read one that stuck with me. I often ask myself, the Dalai Lama wrote, what is the meaning of life? And I concluded that life's purpose is to be happy. Now, the Dalai Lama is not the first person to ask this question. From Moses to Monty Python, humans have tortured themselves to discover the meaning of life. And I can't say for sure that other species don't wonder this as well. After all, Ron Burgundy's dog Baxter is like a miniature Buddha covered in hair. But I think us Homo sapiens are pretty unique in our endless quest for meaning. And it might have something to do with a double-edged sword, that's an awareness of our own mortality. I think a more digestible way to tackle this question, though, is to ask another one. What does it mean to lead a good life? Because, and this is the part where I make an overly idealistic claim, a meaningful life is a life well lived. But what does that mean? And isn't my definition of a good life different from Mr. Chandler's, or Reed Proctor's, or yours? Well, yeah, of course. The easy answer is that it's all relative. We all have different values and goals that guide us. The reality, however, is that we seldom pause to think about the things that matter to us. So this morning, I'd like to explore a few different interpretations of the so-called good life. My goal is not to impose any particular view, but just share the views of others with the hope that they might inspire you to think about this question as it pertains to your own life. Philosophy and religion students should be familiar with our first case. In many respects, the Greek philosopher Plato was a salty curmudgeon. For example, he ranted against theater because he viewed the arts as irrational and morally destructive. While I respectfully disagree with Plato here, I've long admired a quote that's been widely attributed to him. We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. Now, the key to making sense of these words is to define light. We talk about light frequently in this building. Light as a symbol of understanding, virtue, and faith. Plato's statement reminds me of Martin Niemöller. And Martin Niemöller was a Protestant pastor who lived in Germany during the Second World War. You might have heard his famous poem, First They Came For. It goes like this. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. There are several ways to interpret Plato's sentiment. Here's one. Too often, people are afraid of doing the right thing. The right thing, as we know from history, the arts, and real life, is not always the easiest thing. I'm sure there have been times when many of you have seen a friend doing something stupid or dangerous, but just couldn't bring yourself to stop them. I'm certainly guilty of that. In Niemöller's poem, the narrator, and by extension those who said nothing, as the Nazis persecuted and murdered millions, they all chose to hide behind darkness. They weren't being targeted by evil, so the easiest thing to do was remain silent. But I think we'll all agree that wasn't the right thing to do, and it was not the virtuous thing to do. A common refrain throughout Plato's work is that to live a good life, one must live a virtuous life. 2,500 years later, people are still offering their views on what they think is an ideal life. The renowned 21st century poet, Kanye West, once penned a masterpiece titled Good Life. In the chorus, he writes, "Now I go for mine, I got to shine, now throw your hands up in the sky." Let's parse that out a bit. I go for mine. That line means I look out for number one. I do what's best for me. From a poetry analysis standpoint, the repetition of I is certainly notable. To be fair though, Kanye's intent might not be so selfish. As the English scholars here know, the singular possessive pronoun mine sometimes refers to one's family and friends. So perhaps Kanye is saying, I do what's best for me and my people. Okay, next line. I got to shine. A few ways to read this. I need to be illuminated, or less literally, I require attention, or maybe something more prophetic, I'm destined for greatness. Now throw your hands up in the sky. Maybe Kanye is simply telling people to throw their hands up and dance. But he's a poet, and poets like subtext. So perhaps there's meaning beneath the surface. There's a phrase, supplicatory gesture, which refers to any gesture involving worship. Bowing one's head in prayer, fasting on certain holy days, raising one's hands skyward to honor a god or higher power. Now throw your hands up in the sky. Am I saying that Kanye West is asking people to worship him as some sort of god? You might be asking. And I would answer your question with a question. Is that so hard to believe? Before looking at the next example, can I see a show of hands? How many people here have seen the film Ferris Bueller's Day Off? That's pretty impressive. Okay, well, for those of you in the minority, two things. One, you should see it. Clearly, everyone else would agree. But two, here's a brief synopsis. Ferris Bueller is a high school senior who basically gives himself his own headmaster's holiday. He grabs his girlfriend Sloane and his best friend Cameron, and they play hooky all over Chicago. They catch a game at Wrigley Field, press their foreheads against the glass at the top of the Sears Tower, borrow Cameron's dad's 1961 California Spider Ferrari. It's basically the best day ever. And while Ferris is the star of the show, Cameron, his best friend, is the more dynamic character. He's an anxious hypochondriac who's incapable of enjoying himself and afraid of everything. His parents, his shadow, his future. Over the course of the story, though, Cameron learns how to appreciate life. He finds joy in the mundane moments and musters the courage to ultimately stand up to his father. At the end of the film, Ferris delivers a monologue that captures Cameron's journey and the story's overarching meaning. Life moves pretty fast, Ferris says. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you can miss it. Now, I don't think this line requires much analysis, but its simplicity shouldn't be used to dismiss its compelling meaning. Life happens in the present, so if you dwell on the past or worry about the future, life's going to pass you by. Today's second reading offers another piece of simple yet powerful advice. John McCain writes, "A wiser man than I once explained that to live a good life, all you have to do is become less selfish on the way out than you were coming in." As McCain observes, that's easier said than done, and he's right. I mean, it's hard not to be selfish when we're biologically wired to fight for our own existence. But if we can summon the strength to put the needs of others before our own, then we can practice selfless behavior. And it doesn't require grand gestures. Holding the door for someone, such a simple physical act. Well, that represents one way we can put others before ourselves. I'd like to conclude by sharing my own views on what it means to lead a good life. My views are comprised of elements from the four examples we just looked at, including Kanye's. Yes, you can easily use his lyrics to make the case that Kanye West is a raging narcissist, and I think I might have. But I appreciate the sentiment conveyed by the words, "I go for mine." Even if Kanye doesn't mean I do what's best for me and my family, I'm going to pretend he does, because I value my family more than any possession or experience. And even though we're a geographically fractured family, my parents are divorced and live in different states, my brother lives out of a backpack somewhere in Vietnam right now, and my sister's in Los Angeles. We make a commitment to speak regularly and know about each other's lives. And I actually have a confession to make about this. Excluding Mrs. Grover, nobody gives me better, more honest advice than my 21-year-old sister. And she heard me admit that her head wouldn't be able to fit in this chapel. But it's the truth. And of course we fight and have our moments like all families. But we do our best not to hold grudges. A friend's life, as Mr. Hall will soon remind us, is short. That's what I like about Ferris Bueller's worldview. It reminds me how fast life moves. It makes me think about how quickly life can change. Many of you have known loss and tragedy. It's a part of life, but it lurks in a dark crevice of the human experience. It's impossible to prepare for and excruciating to deal with. But if we remind ourselves to live in every moment and cherish every experience with friends and loved ones, we can lead lives free of regret and full of happiness. Plato's idea of embracing the light, even when darkness offers an easier path, is a notion that I find inspirational. Thinking about it inspires me to do things I'm afraid of or uncomfortable with, but I do them because I know they'll make me a stronger person. So I have another confession. I'm terrified of public speaking. I don't know why. I've never had any terrible experience with it. It's just something I've always found difficult and painful. So yeah, my stomach's been a butterfly garden for the last 10 minutes. But I'm stepping outside my comfort zone. And for me, in order to grow as a person, I need to try new and uncomfortable things. And on a related note, I just wanted to salute all of you guys who are going to be standing, acting, and singing tonight in front of your peers. That's really hard work, and that takes a lot of courage. And I thought last night you were awesome. And even the guys that aren't on stage but on the crew, your hard work is certainly not unnoticed. And finally, John McCain's advice reminds me of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. My dad drilled these words into my skull when I was younger. Whenever I fought with my brother, do unto others. Whenever I said anything mean, do unto others. Whenever I fail to think about the consequences of my words or actions, do unto others. It's a simple rule, but it's golden for a reason. Treat people as you want to be treated. You won't always be treated that way yourself, but at least you'll always be good to others. And for me, that's the key to living a happy, meaningful life. Thank you.